that?
It was a long night for Lindsay last night.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Well, good Lord's Day morning to all of you. Hope you're doing well. Our readings are finishing 2 Kings. We're in 2 Kings 15 through the end in our readings today, 15 through 25. That would take us through, chapters 15 through 22. Tonight's reading would be through 25. But in 2 Kings, we're in the divided kingdom, and we'll end the divided kingdom today. And chapter, we'll turn to it, if I can find 2 Kings 15 in my Bible. 2 Kings, who's reigning in chapter 15 in Judah? Azariah or Uzziah. And then we have really after the Jeroboam's reign in the northern kingdom, look at 14:29. Jeroboam slept with his fathers, even with the kings of Israel. Zechariah's son reigned. After Jeroboam the second died, it was pretty much what for the northern kingdom? It was downhill, and downhill in a hurry. I have a note to myself. This was around 753 BC when Zechariah became king, and you think 722, that's roughly 30 years, and the northern kingdom was gone. So it went from the golden age, the expanded boundaries, prosperity, to basically the people eating their own kids. And it was terrible. So we have Zechariah, then Shallum, and some of these kings reigned just a few months, some 1 month. Menahem, and then Pekahiah, and he was replaced by Pekah, and then the last king, Hoshea. And during the same time, in chapters 15, 16, 17, we have Uzziah, and then Azariah, and Jotham, and then who? Ahaz, all right? And then that takes us down to the captivity in chapter 18, and then Sennacherib's and Hezekiah, and the visit by Sennacherib, so to speak, the invasion. And we also have that referred to in what prophet? Isaiah. And it forms a type of a bridge in Isaiah. The first 35 chapters deal primarily with the fall of Assyria. And then 36, 7, 8, and 9, those 4 chapters deal with Hezekiah and Sennacherib. And then there is that bridge over to Babylon, and how Babylon is on the rise. And 40 through 66 of Isaiah primarily those chapters deal with the fact that Judah is going to go into captivity, but then they will return, a remnant will. And then he catapults that idea into a spiritual return under the Messiah. Well, we're not there in Isaiah, we're in 2 Kings, I recognize that. Hezekiah does something, is Hezekiah a good king or bad king? He's a good king, but he has feet of clay. What does he do? Shows something. All that was in his house to the Babylonians. And then the prophecy is that what will happen to those things? They will be taken from him. But then Josiah becomes king in the south. And Josiah is what kind of a king? Good or bad? Good. And during his reign, what do they find? A copy of the law, the book of the law.
Surprise.
So yes, surprise, surprise. They find it in what? Or in where? The very temple itself, and in the Shaphan the scribe, and they bring the law back. It's read before the hearing of the king, and Josiah is so overwrought with just sadness because they failed to keep the law. So he addresses a number of reforms, and they're all good. He puts out the Sodom. I'm looking at 2 Kings 23. I've got a number of, in fact, I numbered them about 16 in the 23rd chapter. You notice in verse 4, all the vessels that were made for Baal, for the Asherah, for all the host of heaven, he burned them without Jerusalem. Verse 5, put down the idolatrous priests. Verse 6, brought out the Asherah. Verse 7, broke down the houses of the Sodomites. Verse 8, defiled the high places. Verse 11, took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun in idolatrous worship. Verse 12, altars that were on the roof of the upper chamber of Ahaz, he broke down. Verse 12, the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the Mount of Corruption, that Solomon had built it for Ashtoreth, he took those down. Verse 14, he broke in pieces the pillars and cut down the Asherah and filled the places with bones of men. And then verse 15, the 11th thing, moreover the altar which was in Bethel, he tore down. And then in 16 through 17, the sepulchres of those in the mount, he took the bones out and burned them to show his disdain of all these men who had been leading Judah into idolatry. Verse 19, all the houses, also the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, he took and did away with it. Verse 20, 14th thing he does, slew all the priests of the high places that were there. Number 15 is in verse 21. He kept what? Kept the Passover, as it is written in the book of the covenant. That was, the Passover, that was the beginning of the three major feasts of the Jews, and they'd not been doing that. Number 16 is in verse 24. The familiar spirits and the wizards, the teraphim, all those things associated with idolatry, he got rid of. It's a wonderful thing to consider all he did. However, while we're not there, turn over real quickly to Jeremiah 3. Jeremiah 3 is a passage you want to really put in the back of your mind. During the days of Josiah, this is in verse 6, he asked the question, did you not see what your sister Israel has done? He said, I put her away, gave her a bill of divorcement, verse 8, because of the lightness of her whoredoms, verse 9. And verse 10, yet for all, this is what he had done to Israel. Look at verse 10 though. And yet for all this, her treacherous sister Judah hath not returned unto me with her whole heart, but feignedly, saith the Lord. We've used that passage a lot because it so aptly describes the very fact that though they had a wonderful, wonderful king in Josiah, the people were where? Were they to his high spirit? No. And they were basically going through the motions because he was leading them. But their hearts had been corrupted by all those practices that had gone on before. And so as a result of that, Judah ends up going into captivity. They just followed a little later. Just a little later. You look like you wanted to say something. Okay. All right. That's as far as we are today in our reading. Comment, question? Anybody? It's a wonderful thing to go through and be able to note what has happened in the past and to try our best to teach, to warn, encourage to do what's right, to encourage in the straight, and we call it, sometimes joke about it, the straight and narrow, but that's really the language Jesus used in Matthew 7. To keep on keeping on, doing what is right, and wanting the truth preached, and so on. Okay. Any comment, question? All right, let's, here we are in the last week. We're going to go quickly through this. He arrives at Bethany and rests on Friday night, which would have been the beginning of the Sabbath. And then Saturday night, he's anointed by Mary at Simon's house, and Judas objects. Triumphal entry scene. Oh, well, I just told you. The day of triumph is seen in the triumphal entry. The people are saying, Hosanna to the Son of David, putting their clothes in the way for him, as well as cutting down what? palm branches. And then let me go back. Then the day of authority on Monday by cursing the fig tree and cleansing the temple. And then Tuesday, we have this conflict, a very long day evidently. The Pharisees and Herodians asked Jesus, is it lawful to pay tribute to Caesar? The Sadducees come in with a question about the man who had his wife. He dies. She had 6 of his brothers. In the resurrection, whose will she be? Then the Pharisees put a scribe forward, which is the greatest commandment, and he answers that. And then after that, Jesus asked them an unanswerable, well, it was answerable, but they couldn't answer it and be honest to their own principles. They're unprincipled people. And so he said, what think you of the Christ? What's the rest of it? Whose son is he? And they said, the son of David. How then did David in the Spirit call him, say, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand till I make thine enemies a footstool of thy feet. If he is his Lord, how is he his son? And so that pointed out his humanity as well as his deity, and the fact that his kingship would be in heaven. And we've gone over all that. Okay, so then where we are now is his woe. He pronounces these denunciations or woes against the scribes and the Pharisees. And we looked at the passages first in here we are, Mark 12, 38 through 40, and Luke 20, which primarily deal with the fact that they make pretense of long prayers, and they devour whose houses? The widows' houses. Now that's going to come up significantly, I think, when we finish Matthew 23, because the next thing chronologically is Jesus is by the treasury and observes how people do what? Give. And there's a widow who gives the 2 mites. And so you have the contrast between the Pharisees and the scribes, and they're doing things basically to be seen of men, and then this poor widow over here who gives all she had, even all of her living. So that's where we are. On our questions, well, let's go to Matthew 23 first. I'm still in 2 Kings, or Jeremiah rather. Matthew 23. We've already read Wednesday night the passages in Mark and Luke's account that dismiss this lengthy chapter in just a few verses, 2 or 3 verses. And Matthew 23, on page 75 of our booklets, we pointed out in the first 12 verses that the motives are exposed. What verse shows exactly what their motives were, or their motive was? That's right. Yeah. What verse is that between 1 and 12? It's right. It says it in those many words. All their works they do to be seen of men. Verse 5. And then what they wear, the phylacteries are broadened, the garments are enlarged, where they want to sit and be seen, the chief place of feast, the seats in the synagogues, and how they want to be addressed, be called rabbi. And then we talked at length about that in verses 8 through 12. And the desire is, it was not wrong to be a teacher, but to be called particularly that, by these fellows. They love to be called rabbi or father. And Jesus said, don't do what? Verse 9. Don't call anyone father on the earth. One is your father, even he who is in heaven. Don't be called masters. One is your master. And then we point out in 11 and 12, you could summarize the teaching in 2 words. What Jesus expects out of us is humble service. Humble service. And that was the very opposite of what these people were all after. We got down through what question, guys? We answered B under the note there, and then
we stopped at the top of page 76.
On the top of page 76. Okay, that's right, regarding the O's. All right, good. So 13, 14, and 15, the proselyte, they devour widows' houses, and then 16 through 22 We did mention Wednesday night that we've already heard Jesus talk about this somewhat in the Sermon on the Mount. And now we have a little more information about that. Let's read it, 16 through 22. Brother Richard, if you would.
Matthew 23.
Right, 16 through 22.
Woe unto you, ye blind guides, which say, Whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever sweareth by the gift that is upon it, he is guilty. Ye fools and blind, for whether is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifieth the gift? Whoso therefore shall swear by the altar sweareth by it, and by all things upon it. And whoso shall swear by the temple sweareth by it, and by him that dwelleth therein. Go down to.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. All right. In essence, what were they doing? They were saying it's possible to do what on certain occasions? Yeah. Let's back up just for a second. To swear means to call on some higher being, thing, place, as a witness of what? A witness to what you are. You're saying. Right. Now, a witness to really the veracity, the truthfulness of what the testimony you're about to give. Have people who have sworn lied?
Sure.
Yes. So lying, does lying prevent, does swearing prevent lying? Absolutely not. Swearing, calling on, and even swearing by the gods of the Old Testament, would be to invoke a judgment or a penalty high on me if I didn't tell the truth. Likewise, in a court of law, when people are sworn in, then they're so-called under oath, then that means if they lie, they have perjured themselves. And lying under oath gives a greater what? A greater penalty. All right, a greater penalty. So here's the point, I take it to be. The Jews had made some loopholes around here. So if I swear by something over here, I can lie, and it really won't matter. But now if I swear by over here, I better tell the truth. That's the idea between obligated or what you owe. Whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is a debtor. You owe to tell the truth. But if you swear by the temple, it's nothing. You don't owe anything. You don't owe any obligation. So he has the temple and the gold that is sanctified by the temple. Or the altar, verse 18, and the gift that is on the altar, that is sanctified by the altar. And so Jesus says, which is greater, the altar or the gift that's sanctified by the altar? Which is greater, the temple or the gold that is sanctified by the temple? In other words, all of them are related to, obviously, to God. And so when you're calling God in league or in association with you and you're telling a lie, it doesn't matter if it's the gold or the temple or the altar or the gift on the altar, or it doesn't matter what it is. You're calling God into association with a lie. And that's in the Ten Commandments. What was the commandment that really forbade all of this? Thou shalt not bear false witness, false testimony. Now, in a legal sense, that certainly would be primary, but then that actually tells us we should not do what under any circumstance? We should not lie. That's the main point. Tell the truth. And, even the Proverbs indicate that a lying tongue, that God has always looked. That's a universal law of God. In fact, even during the time of Abraham, you remember with Abimelech, and even Pharaoh, Genesis 13, Genesis 12, the latter part of 12, and then in Genesis 20 with Abimelech. When Pharaoh went down into Egypt and later into the Philistine camp, and he lied about whom? Sarah. He said, she is my sister, which was a half-truth, but he stated it for the purpose of deceiving. And anytime we tell something with the purpose of deception, it's a lie. And Jesus, so let's turn back real quickly to Matthew 5. Hold our hands there. Jesus uses a little different language. He said, you've heard it said, this is verse 33, you have heard it said of them of old time, thou shalt not forswear thyself, or some of your translations say, swear falsely, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all. Don't swear by heaven. Well, it's related to God. It's his throne. What about the earth? It's the footstool of his feet. What about Jerusalem? City of the great king. What about your head? Well, you can't control whether you got gray or white or dark hair. So what it ought to be, let your speech be yes, yes, or yea, yea, nay, nay, and whatsoever is more than these, any prevarication is of the evil one. So just tell the truth is the point Jesus makes. In that he said, don't swear at all. There's a simple, you may remember what we've gone over in this, but there are two simple things you can always remember. Why Christians don't need to swear, besides the fact that God says don't do it. One is, swearing will never make a lie true. Swearing is, if somebody tells a lie and they're under oath, it's still a lie. It's not going to change it. Second, if a person tells the truth, being under oath does not make the truth he tells any more true. It's still true. It's the same thing. It hasn't changed. And so there are at least two reasons that Christians have no business swearing or calling on God as witness to the testimony we are giving. He said, don't do that. And so here back in 23, that's what they were doing. And they were just making making loopholes to lie. That's a simple truth. Yes, sir. Oh, yes, sir.
That is a constant theme throughout the Bible.
Yes.
All the way from early Genesis all the
Yes.
way to Revelation 21.
21:8.
Yep.
All liars
And-
shall have their
and-
part. Mm-hmm.
You see that God is consistent
Yeah.
about being truthful.
Yes.
Like we just read it in Matthew 5, your yes, yes, and your no, no.
Yes.
And that's, look at society today. They expect you to lie.
Yeah.
We see it, but Christians cannot be part of that.
You could say a contract between parties is just in order so everybody knows what each is to do. But in a sense, a contract it almost assumes that somebody is going to try to do what? Get out of doing what they promised to do. And
Like the old thing, it keeps you honest.
Contract keeps you honest. Yeah, keeps up both parties honest. If somebody says, "I'll pay you to do this much work," and then the work is done on his part, the payment is made on his part, no need of contract. But it gets hazy, and that's why I guess I probably use the phrase too often. But there's a simplicity to the religion of Jesus Christ. They're so simple. Just be transparent, do what you're supposed to do, and everything's okay. I'm thinking in Ephesians 4, Paul said, let putting away falsehood, speak ye truth, each one with his neighbor, for we are members one of another. If there should be truth expected from people, it should be within what? Within the church. Yeah, within the church. Okay, let's go back and answer our questions then. On the top of 76, what did Jesus earlier said would eliminate the whole problem mentioned in these verses? Anybody? Don't swear at all. How did Jesus show their inconsistencies, even within their own distinctions concerning oaths? Well, to swear by one part does what?
Makes it a lie as well as the other. You need to emphasize more about in the writings of the Jews were, I don't know how to describe it, they were more to nitpick ways around keeping the law of Moses than they were to glorify God and keep His word.
Yeah.
You know, they had the Jewish scholars and the Talmud and all that is minutia about
How you can
if
get
your
around
house
it.
is on fire, you can put on
Yeah.
2 garments and run out and save, and all kinds of nitpicking like that. And I don't know why that book is glorified so much.
Yeah, yeah. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be.
Because, you know,
It's just an
it's
effort
always
to get
listed
around
among the holy writings
of the Jews. Yeah,
And,
yeah. But there's a simplicity to all this, even of the law, that and even in the intent of the Old Testament law was to tell the truth, and yet often that was not the case. Let's move on. 23 and 24 here, Sister Eleanor, if you would.
Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Ye blind guides, which strain at the gnat and swallow the camel.
All right. Mint, anise, and cumin were what? Spices or herbs that were, very small in comparison. And he says you're very careful about tithing mint, anise, and cumin, but you're not too careful about the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. So in essence, don't sweat small stuff. It's okay not to tithe mint, anise, and cumin as long as you have justice, mercy, and faith. Is that what he said? No, he did not say that. He said these you should have done and not left the other undone. And so you got it right about the mint, anise, and cumin, something very small, and yet you've overlooked these heavier, greater matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. Did Jesus rebuke them for tithing mint, anise, and cumin? Under 3? No. What was their fault? They left undone. What was that?
The important thing.
The important, yeah, things that that was in the relation to God. They're tithing that, but justice, mercy, and faith. That's God, relation with God, relation with the basic foundational principles of their relation with each other.
Look, it was easier for them to give.
That's
Give me the mint. I can do this good. This
Yeah.
other stuff, I'm having trouble with.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. I mentioned in the note, the student may notice a similarity between Jesus' statement here and the prophets, especially Micah 6, verse 8. In a book filled with condemnation against Judah and Israel because of their immorality, injustices, and oppressive conduct toward their own brethren, Jehovah says, He has showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee but to do justly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with thy God. Right attitudes toward men and God, such as justice, mercy, and humble faith, had to characterize a true worshiper for God's approval. Otherwise, the offerings were mere show. Similarly, during the days of Jesus, many religious leaders were scrupulous about tithing some of their smallest herbs, while at the same time neglecting the major principles that should guide all their actions between others and God. It's almost like Jesus took Micah 6, verse 8, and just twisted it a little and said, these are weighty matters of the law that you're not keeping. It's also, we've tried to point this out on numerous occasions, and that is when Jesus will allude or even quote from some Old Testament passage, he applies the context of that passage to the context of his hearers. And so here in Micah, while, you know, you got gross immorality going on and injustices to people and unconcern about them in so many spiritual ways, and yet you've got them, you know, scrupulously, like in Hosea's day, scrupulously detailed on the sacrifices. And Jesus turns that around and basically applies the same passage or the same principle, same time frame to his own people of his day. Justice, mercy, and faith.
You have to be impressed with verses like straining out the gnat, swallowing the camel.
Yes.
You know, you didn't want a gnat to get in there because it was an unclean thing.
Yeah.
So you'd filter your water you were drinking maybe.
Yeah.
But then the camel, which was an unclean animal,
Yeah.
you'd eat the whole thing.
Eat the whole thing? Yes.
That picture is the way they treated the minutia
Yes.
of the law. And of course it was for their benefit.
For their own benefit, yeah.
This was stuff they should have been teaching in their position.
Yeah.
What the law was about, how to treat other people, how to have faith, how to have humility,
Yeah.
and they just went right by that.
Exactly right, yeah. He continues on in 25 and 26 with, and really 27 and 28 as I put it all together, with the idea of more concern about what? The outside than the inside. I have it down here on the appearance of outward purity, but inward corruption. Let's read that, Patty, if you would. 25 through 26. And, yeah, just read the whole thing, 25 through 28.
Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you cleanse the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of extortion and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first cleanse the inside of the cup and dish, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness.
Can't you imagine, have any of us ever had something in the refrigerator, maybe the back of the refrigerator, and we left it there and we forgot about it? Nobody in this room has ever done that. I have. When I was before I married, somebody gave me a watermelon, parts of watermelon, and somehow I got to the back, and ooh, it looked terrible after a while. And you should think if something's in a bowl, and then mold grows on it, and then maybe you throw it out and you let it dry, and it's just so, and you're real concerned about washing off the outside of the plate, the platter, or the bowl, but inwardly it's just full of corruption. And that's the picture he gives of these people. Then the sepulchres, they would paint them with basically whitewash in order for people to keep from, remember, they're not even to step on the graves, because that might do what to them? Make them ceremonially unclean, remember? So here they're putting like a, danger, no trespassing on there. And it says, you make those things appear beautiful, but inwardly, they're full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. And he says, that's the way you are. You appear righteous, you appear outwardly pure, but inwardly you're corrupt to the bone. And so, let's see. No, A under 4, to what does Jesus compare these religious leaders in 25 and 6? Cleansing what? Outside of a cup or plate, and yet within is what? Extortion and excess. To what in 27 and 8? 27 and 8. 27 and 8. I was reading my, whited sepulchres or tombs. And on what should they work first? The inside. You work on the inside, the outside will do what? It'll take care of itself. That's exactly right.
Is this not kind of going back to what he told them in verse 5
Yes.
about their broad?
To be seen, yes.
Is anything to be seen on the outside, yet the inside they're not?
Exactly right. All right, let's move on in 29 through 36. Sister Billy, if you would, I skipped you a while ago. They evidently said, you know, we wouldn't be like our brethren, the prophets, but they really would be, and they really were, and they would end up being the same way, filling up the measure of their ancient brethren iniquity by crucifying Jesus. Okay, 29 through 36, Sister Billy.
Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you build the tombs of the prophets and garnish the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Wherefore ye be witnesses unto yourselves that ye are the children of them which killed the prophets. Fill ye up then the measure of your fathers. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell?
Yeah, let's stop just for right now. Here they had some still around some of the places where some of the prophets were buried. And so they'd go around and you know, like Decoration Day for us, they'd put flowers out and make sure everything was just right and make it look like they honored the prophets. But actually, rather than honor the prophets, they were just like the ones who did what to the prophets? Who killed the prophets. Yeah, they were unlike them, and they were like the people who killed them. Okay, to keep reading that, Sister Billy.
Wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets and wise men and scribes, and some of them ye shall kill and crucify, and some of them shall ye scourge in the synagogues and persecute them from city to city, that upon you may come all the righteous blood shed upon the earth, from the blood of righteous Abel unto the blood of Zechariah son of
Berechiah.
whom you slew between the temple and the altar. Verily, I say unto you, all of these things shall come upon this generation.
Okay, so you, verse 31, you're witnesses or witness to yourselves that you're the sons of those who slew these prophets. You honor them, kind of like you honor me with your lips, but your heart is far from me. Fill up the measure of your fathers, verse 32. And then 34 is predictive, really, of some things that occurred in the book of Acts. You think I'll send you prophets, wise men. You think about the apostles and prophets, wise men, teachers among the Jews, scribes. Some of them shall you kill. Well, you think about Stephen, Acts 7, James' brother John in Acts 12. Crucify. I don't know of any who were, but evidently some had been. Some of them shall you scourge in the synagogues, persecute from city to city. You just follow the life of Paul and you see how that was done. That upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth. That is a just desert of all the people who have been righteous that your fathers have persecuted. You're going to fill up the cup to the brim. And what would be ultimately the justice God would mete out on them as a people, a national people? The what? The destruction of Jerusalem. Yeah, and that seems to be what he's pointing toward there. All right, number 5a. How did they prove they would have killed the prophets as their fathers had done? By what? By what? Fill up the, doesn't he say, you're witness that you're the sons of them that slew the prophets. When he said you're the sons of them that slew the prophets, that word sons can mean sometimes biological descendants, but it can also mean likeness of. You're sons of your father the devil. You're like him. So how would they be like him? What would they end up doing?
To kill the Son of God.
Kill the Son of
The
God.
ultimate
Exactly.
end. In the parable where the servants were sent and they were killed and mistreated.
Yes.
The Son was sent to have the honor due to him in that enterprise, and they ignored that too.
Yes.
The Jewish hierarchy of the first century were like the Jewish hierarchy that supported the evil kings. You know,
Yeah.
Give me some of the kings, they asked for a prophet, and so they get a false prophet in there, and they tell them what they wanted to hear. And of course, at the very end, when Jeremiah was prophesying, he said, you need to surrender, and they go into captivity, and they say, oh, this is only going to be 2 years, and it'll be
Yeah.
over. And
Yeah. The sons of the prophets are the sons of their fathers. I don't mean the sons of the father. Sons of them that slew the prophets in verse 31. You're just like they were. And you're no better than they. And what would happen in verse 32, fill up then the measure of your fathers. That's just an idea. Look, you're going to take what they've done and you're going to complete the job with your crucifixion of me. Brother Gene referred to Matthew 22, which was the parable of the wedding feast. He just earlier said the same thing earlier in the day, same day. We've got the same events of the same day going on that he's talking about, sending prophets and sending wise men, and then surely they'll reverence my son. Well, that's the parable of the husbandman. And then in the parable of the marriage feast, the same idea. There's the feast is made for the king's son, and there was somebody that, those were bidden, did not want to come, so they weren't there. Then even one who had been bidden and was there did not have on a what? A wedding garment, and he was cast out. So all of these things really were predictive of the destruction of Jerusalem. Verse 32, fill ye up then the measure of your fathers, as if to say, your fathers began the job, you will finish it. Similar expressions found in Genesis 15:16, when the iniquity of the Amorites being not yet full. It would get to the full level, and God would destroy, or at least would allow the Jews to conquer the land of Canaan. What single deed would the scribes and Pharisees do which would fill up the measure of their fathers? We've already mentioned it. They're what? Crucifixion of Christ, right. Who earlier called these religious leaders serpents? John the Baptist. Since they had not changed in that time, what terrible end does Jesus say awaited them? Well, all the righteous blood shed on the earth, from the blood of Abel to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, all the righteous blood. That just gives an idea that justice has been is certain. Justice is certain. It has been delayed in coming, but now they will fill up their measure, and God's judgment will be certain. Give at least 2 examples of fulfillment of verse 34 from the book of Acts. Well, I already mentioned a couple. Sister Channing?
Stephen and Paul.
Stephen, James, Paul, how they were beaten, Acts 5 verse 40. Acts 22 verse 24, Paul was tied to the whipping post where he was going to be scourged, you remember? Then he appealed to his Roman citizenship to save him from it. Verse 35 refers to the deaths of 2 righteous men by the hand of iniquitous men. Abel was the first to die. Zechariah's death is described in 2 Chronicles 24, which comes at the close of the Old Testament according to the Hebrew arrangement. From the blood of Abel unto Zechariah was a type of a summary of the history of martyrs in the Old Testament. That upon you may come all the righteous blood shed on the earth would indicate that a consummation of all these wicked acts would be found when they did what? Well, it's just a repeat. Crucified Jesus. And quoted from McGarvey in the Fourfold Gospel, God made that generation the focus of the world's light and privilege, but the men of that time made it the focus of the world's wickedness and punishment. This punishment began about 37 years later in the war with Rome, which lasted 5 years and culminated in the destruction of Jerusalem. So they were brought down as a people. Answer our questions and we'll just read it. What did Jesus desire for Jerusalem to be what? Gathered together. Since those in the temple turned away from Christ, what was God going to do to their house? Leave it desolate. And I mentioned the temple was God's house, his dwelling, but now Christ says, behold, your house is left to you desolate. Not only would the nation be destroyed, the temple would be destroyed. What's the significance of your house when compared to Christ's earlier words, my house shall be called a house of prayer? Remember, it was God's house originally because his physical presence was made known there. Well, he would do what? Or did what?
He removed his presence.
That's right. He removed his presence from it. And so instead of his house, it became their house. And he said, I leave to you your house desolate. Though Jesus' last public address has been filled with condemnation of the Jewish leaders, and now they're sitting, he also gives a glimmer of hope. Earlier, many had eagerly welcomed him during his triumphal entry with Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord, Hosanna in the highest, which was a messianic statement. Jesus now repeats a portion of it and says that these Jews would not see him until they would say what? Blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord. While God removed his physical presence and the nation would be destroyed a few years later, yet when any among the Jews would accept his messiahship, they could see him in peace now and in heaven by sight. You think about the 3,000 Jews on Pentecost, the 5,000 by Acts 4 verse 4. And then all those summary statements, multitudes were added to the Lord, both men and women. All those summary statements that Luke makes throughout Acts that indicate, yeah, there were a lot of Jews. But as a whole, what was their reaction to Christ and the gospel? They rejected it. And hence they came apart as a nation. All right.
Went into his own, and his own received him not.
Yes, that's exactly right. He came to his own received him not. That statement that this generation had light and privileges that none had had before. They were able to hear the very words of Jesus coming out of his mouth. I remember after the parable of the sower in Matthew 13, he said, let me turn to that. I know our time's gone, but we'll turn to that and be gone. In Matthew 13, in verse 16, after he gave some explanation here, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see the things which ye see, and saw them not, and to hear the things which ye hear, and heard them not. People who had been looking forward in time to the time when the Messiah would come, long to hear and you have no use for it. Is it any different today? You can have some of the finest preaching, finest teaching that people have ever heard on this side of inspiration, and people just turn away from it. I think about people I grew up with that heard the same message I heard. And I know Randy here at Pleasant Grove has been here all his life. People heard, I'm so good preaching. And it would encourage people to dedicate themselves to the Lord with a whole heart. And heard that. And just doesn't mean much. And no difference, really, in people who are like that and people who are like the time who heard Jesus. It wasn't Jesus' attitude that was wrong. He didn't come with them with the right manner. Everything was right about Jesus, and still what? John 6, upon this, many of his disciples walked no more with him. So it wasn't his fault. And so that ought to give us some courage and confidence. We just keep doing right and just recognize that not everybody has all, even during the days of Jesus, not everybody did right. Okay,